Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about what may be a very devious and diabolical plan. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we're going to talk about a very devious plan. It looks like, hopefully, this is working. Yes, it is. What do you know? Having some problems on Rockfin, but it seems to be working. Okay, let's talk about this. One of the things that I thought about earlier, if I can get my stuff straight, one of the things I thought about earlier was how could we, for God's sake, I'm half naked here. One of the things I could think about, I was thinking about was, how can we look at some of the things that were said in the Epstein files, right? How could we look at that and try to figure out? There we go. Oh, okay. Yeah, I got my friggin'. Okay, I'm all over the place here. How could we look at some things that were in the Epstein files and then look at what's happening on the battlefield and see if we can put some of this stuff together? Okay, one of the things that I recall in the Epstein files was this infamous discussion between Epstein and Bill Gates. And apparently somewhere in that discussion, they talked about how do we get rid of the poor people, like as a whole, as a group, right? How do we get rid of these friggin' poor people, right? Now, keeping in mind additionally that Epstein being clearly a Zionist, clearly being aligned with part of, a member of the Zionist intelligence community. And the things that we've heard lately, this Greater Israel Project, it seems to be the plan for world Zionism. I thought to myself, well, he talked about depopulation. How could this fit in, right? How could this fit into that? Well, okay, it wasn't hard. Let's start here. I took a couple of notes, right? So one of the things that I thought about was the idea of desalinization plants. I talked about, what's his name? Professor Zhang. Everybody's seen him out there. And he discussed desalinization plants and how in some areas, basically people could not exist without them, right? If you've got large areas of the Middle East that are basically, they're desert, you can't really grow food there. So the people have a lot of money. But as an example, these Persian Gulf countries, they have to import 90% of their food, right? So, if they're importing 90% of their food, that means everything has to come in. It has to come in through the Straits of Hormuz, and it's not a bad idea to close the Straits of Hormuz, not just for the oil, but now you cut out the 90% of the people. Keeping in mind that as we see with settler colonialism, as we see with Zionism, as we see with what's happening, in instances like that, be it, North America or Australia, or in this instance, Palestine, when the people are there, you got to find a way to get them out of your hair. Either, one or two options. You can get them to voluntarily just leave or acquiesce to whatever you want, or a much more evil option, and that is to, as they say on YouTube all too often today, unalive them, which seems to be the Zionist way of doing things, since it's, pretty much a fascist ideology. Fascism kind of takes great joy in unaliving people, right? Okay, so I thought to myself, there's a discussion, they probably won't tax desalinization plants because that'll could cause mass death. But think about this. The Greater Israel Project means Israel takes over everything. It takes over Saudi Arabia, it takes over Egypt, it takes over all of that stuff, becomes part of Israel. You got to get rid of those people, don't you? You got Arabs and Muslim people running all over creation on your land. Just like unfortunately, you've got Palestinians running all over the place on your land. And if you're the Israelis, You really don't want them running all over the place on your land. It's all your land. Do you remember when what the U.S. said about Venezuela? Those darn Venezuelans, they stole our land and our oil in Venezuela. In Venezuela. That is the mentality of settler colonialism that Trump gave you. Those people stole our land and our oil in Venezuela. That's ours. It's not theirs, it's ours. Everything's ours. It's all theirs, everything's ours, right? And from the perspective of the Zionists, man, you got a whole lot of Muslims that are a problem when they're on your land. Gee, how could we resolve that problem? Okay, what you saw was the Israelis attack the desalinization plant and attack some gigantic oil facility, which of course causes environmental disaster, and it causes oil to rain down all over the place, right? So you're creating environmental disasters, and of course you're attacking desalinization plants so that people in certain areas can't get water, right? Because you need those people out of the way, don't you? Now, what else do we see? We saw the Zionists involved in false flags, right? It has been widely reported. Tucker Carlson certainly reported that some of them were caught in a couple of the Muslim countries, and they had explosives, and they were going to obviously blow stuff up and do false flags and blame it on Iran. In addition, we know that there were attacks on Saudi oil facilities, and there were attacks on Cypriot facilities that were, again, blamed on what? Blamed on Iran. Now, why Cypriot facilities? Well, it'd be nice if you could drag Turkey in there, because that's also part of the Great Israel Project. You got to get those darn Turks out of the way too, don't you? You need them involved in the war. So what do? You do a couple of things. Number one, you false flag, and you pretend that there's an attack from Iran on whoever, right? Turkey, you want an Iran on Turkey. What do you know? A missile flew towards Turkey, right? Okay. You want to, certainly the Saudis, well, that's all part of Israel. So you want to do some false flags on Saudis, right? You want to, Cyprus is about dragging Turkey into it. You want Turkey involved. I would be willing to bet that Cyprus, that Greek jets and things like that going into Cyprus are at the behest of the U.S. and or Israel, so that you can get Turkey in there, so you can destabilize that and maybe get Turkey at war with Greece, and somehow get Turkey blown to smithereens, get that weakened, get that out of the way, because it's part of Israel. It's all part of Israel. They want to take all of it, and we got to get those stinking people out of the way to do it. Now, what about the Kurds? Well, that's easy. Hey, Kurds, how many Kurds we got? Hey, we got a couple million. I got an idea. We'll throw them at the Iranians. Yeah, I mean, think about it. The U.S. says to the Kurds, here's what we want you to do. You got this gigantic country here, very, very powerful military. What we want you to do, we're going to give you the arms, and we want you to go charge right into Iran, right into the teeth of the Iranian military. And at which point, there ain't going to be no Kurds left. Now, of course, that will also piss off the Turks, because the Turks are unhappy with the Kurds rising up. The Turks go in, they mow down, they bomb, they wipe out the Kurds. So you use both the Iranians and the Turks to wipe out the Kurds. You pitch the Turks against Greece, and you can weaken the Kurds. So now you got the word Kurds on two fronts, at minimum two fronts, and the Turks. And at some point, you're planning on weakening everybody else. Later, you're going to go confront the Turks and fight them and take them out. The Turks are done. You got to take them out. And so you got to drag them in. You see what I'm saying? It's dragging these countries into war with each other. It is, as I always say, you get North Korea to fight South Korea. They're Koreans. You get Taiwan to fight China. They're Chinese. You get the Sunni Muslims to fight the Shia Muslims. They're all Muslims, but they're in your way. And if they can kill each other out, you're good, right? You get the Americans. Oh, you have to hate that guy. Why? Because he's unvaccinated, or he's a Trumper, or he's a Democrat, or he's a Republican, right? You always get the people who have the most in common to fight each other and wipe each other out. And so now what they're doing, be it via false flags, etc., is doing their best to drag the Turks in against the Kurds. They'll wipe the Kurds out. The Turks and the Greeks will fight. The Turks and the Iranians, maybe you can get them to fight. And you get all of these people to fight amongst each other and wipe each other out because you want the greater Israel project. And you got to get them out of the way. Right? Now, let me add this. And there was a discussion about not attacking desalinization plants. Well, Professor Zhang said something that basically gives the Israelis the keys to the city, right? And I heard someone else talking about it also, and that is this: look, these Gulf countries, these Gulf states, right? They have to have desalinization plants. They don't have any water. They don't have aquifers. They don't have water, right? They don't have desalinization plants. So what do? You attack Iran's desalinization plant from Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, wherever, because you want to draw Iran into attacking their desalinization plants. You, Israel, don't have to attack the desalinization plants. You get the Muslims, Sunnis and Shias, to attack each other's desalinization plants. And what happens now? All the Persian Gulf countries, none of them have water. That means the people there, they got two options. They leave your land, right? It's Greater Israel, or they die of thirst, which for the Zionists is just as well. So what you have is this evil diabolical plan. What did they talk about? Depopulation. And the Israelis have already shown you, all you have to do is look at what they've done to the Palestinians, and you understand that that's what they want to do to the Egyptians and the Saudis and the whole Gulf Coast. Now, look, these these Persian Gulf, the Gulf states, right? Here's the thing about it. They're looking at the Americans, and they're like, Americans, they're shocked. I can't believe it. Americans, I can't believe it. You're helping the Israelis, but you're not helping us. Well, that's madness. That's ridiculous. Why would you do that? Because they want you to die. Of course not. They're helping the Israelis. Of course, they took the air defense systems out of our countries and they put them in the Israelis. What? Why? Why would you do that? They told you why. They want depopulation. They want you out of the way. Of course, look. If you have any kind of air defense systems in the Gulf countries, then they'll be able to protect themselves. They'll be able to stop a missile from coming in, perhaps even a false flag missile that might be coming from the United States or Israel, right? They'll be able to block them. And that way they can maybe protect their desalinization plants. Well, you don't want that, do you? Because then they'll have water. You blow their desalinization plants, and then you say Iran did it. And you want to make sure they can't protect them. So what do? You take your air defense systems out and make sure they have no protection. And now the Gulf states are waking up. They're like, hey, what's going on here? You're not protecting us. And we're like, oh, yes. And in other news, there was a fork discovered in a kitchen. No, they're not, because they want you to be unalived, out of the way, move on, floating face down in the Gulf, whatever. They want you out of here. It's clear right now. And what they're trying to do is a couple of things. Number one, first and easiest thing is to set you into war with Iran. What's the first thing we heard? Within days afterwards, right? It was some false flag in, oh yes, the Saudi oil facility has been hit. And then the Saudis are joining the war with Israel. I bet you right now you can check within a day or two. And I'm like, the Saudis? That doesn't make sense. Yes, the Saudis are going to be getting bombing raids immediately. I bet if I search Saudis join war, I bet if I search that, there you go. There you go. Let me show you how easy this one is, right? Let's look at this article and let's look at the date. Tuesday, March 3rd. So they attacked on Friday. And on March 3rd, Iran strikes Saudi infrastructure. Now, remember something. Iran said we didn't do it, that it was a false flag, that Israel did it. So what did they do? And where is this in? The Jerusalem Post. What do you know? Right? Iran strikes Saudi infrastructure, pushing Riyadh towards possible war. There you go. Forcing Riyadh to weigh retaliation against fear. So what are they saying? And now we found out that they didn't do it, that the Iranians didn't do it. So what is it? They within 2 to 3 days after they started the war, they tried to draw the Saudis in against the Iranians, figuring like this. Well, the Iranians will kill as many Saudis as they can, and then after that, the rest of them will die of thirst or leave because they're going to have no desalinization plants, and we don't have to blow them up because they'll blow up each other's desalinization plants. And by the way, once they start firing missiles at each other, who's going to know that an extra missile might have came from the U.S. or Israel and just happened to hit a desalinization plant, right? The Iranians don't have to. As soon as missiles started flying, what they wanted to do was Iran, Saudi, fight. As soon as missiles start flying, the Israelis come in and they blow up the Saudi desalinization plant. Oh, do you believe what the Iranians done? That's a war crime. They must be stopped. The plan of this war, a big part of it, is to depopulate the Middle East, and 2 things they need to do. Number 1, they need to draw Gulf countries into the war against Iran, or somehow involve them, somehow get claims that they've done something, do some false flag. Excuse me. So they need to draw them in, and then they need all of the infrastructure, which will include the oil infrastructure. They want it destroyed. Because look, if the oil infrastructure is not destroyed, even if they do something, the Saudis can still sell oil, make money, and rebuild everything. They want that stuff out of the way. The Israelis don't care about the rest of the world. Well, but 4 billion people will die of starvation. Well, wonderful. Think about the Zionists. What do you think? They're going to say bad? What do you think if you go but guys, if you cut off all the oil infrastructure in the region, 2 billion people will die of starvation. What do you think? The Israelis are going to be like, oh, darn, we don't want that to happen. No, less cattle. Fewer cattle, all the better. They're happier, right? As far as they're concerned, if they can get this depopulation thing going, then you spread it out. You just take where's all the Sunni Muslims in the Gulf Coast? Oh yeah, when their desalinization plants blew, they all died of thirst, and the ones that could crawl away left. And so I guess it's just for us, the chosen people. Sorry now, darn. Hey, a land without a people, for people without a land. There you go. Right? It's a land without a people because the people are all dead. And that seems to be the plan. I mean, they're trying to turn occupied Palestine into a land without a people. When they say a land without a people, what they mean is because we killed them all, either through deceit, through deception, through false flags, through dragging them into wars, right? Now, let me continue. What Epstein and Gates talked about was getting rid of as a block, the poor people. I gotta get rid of them. There's too many of these stinking poor people all over the place. And they're just eating food and doing things we don't want them to do, having kids. Now we got to stop that. We got to get rid of poor people. So look, again, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone, right? You, number 1, as I said, get rid of the desalinization plants, destroy all the oil infrastructure, right? So that causes no oil, a little bit and cut down the gas dramatically. What else do you cut down dramatically? The fertilizer. You want to cut back on the worldwide fertilizer output. Why? Because then you have fewer crops, and then you have yourself a genuine, good old-fashioned food shortage. And what happens then? Well, will people die? Yes, but the other part of it is they don't all have to die of starvation for this reason. I don't know if you know about a number of studies, but what they've shown is they take these mice and they put all these mice together. And they give them food, 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 food. They don't eat all the food, and what do they want? And what happened is the mice have a lot of babies. Okay. Now they'll take the, let's say it's 100 mice. You take the same population of mice and you just give them enough to just bear a little less than they need so that they're hungry all the time, but they can survive, but they're hungry a lot, right? The birth rate drops dramatically because when you have less food, the females are less fertile. With less food, they're less fertile. And it's kind of a natural phenomenon where if there isn't enough food to feed a lot of people, that the population of that area, because they're less fertile, won't create more people to be fed. Okay, so if you wipe out the oil and gas infrastructure in the region, you're now doing a worldwide depopulation. And who is that aimed at? That's the people who have the least amount of food. And some of them will starve, but the ones that don't starve will have less food. And if you have less food, the phenomenon is if a person is hungry, more often than not, that makes women and men both, a man's sperm count goes down, etc. This is a natural phenomenon and found in all animals. If animals live in a forest in a given area, there's different kind of selections, K selection, this kind of, but anyway, but the bottom line is you got a certain size of forest and there's X amount of animals in there. Less food, the animals become less fertile. They become stressed from not having enough food, which makes you less fertile, which means you have less mouths to feed, and it makes it easier for the others to survive, right? Because they don't have as much competition for food. Well, guess what happens? Close the Straits of Hormuz, close a significant portion of the gas. You stress the entire world. You lower depopulation. They have less babies, and some of them are going to starve. And then they could be wars over food and water and things like that. And Bill Gates and Epstein were sitting there, emailing. Well, what do you think about depopulation? It's a tremendous idea. Let's go for it now. How are we going to do it? I don't know. All we got to do is get Trump in office, and then we'll push him into something in the Middle East, and that'll work. It seems to me that I have any other notes. We've already seen the beginning of this. Now, there is a tremendous amount. Let me see if I can find anything on it. As you probably know, there are already reports. One of them is Bahrain. Bahrain is a country that is a Gulf state, tiny little country, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. They got, like 300,000 or 400,000 people. A statelet. It isn't even really a country. It's 80% Shia, 20% Sunni. It has minority rule. Apparently, it's become unstable. And there are tremendous amount of rumors going around now that the king or the royal family of Bahrain may have fled to Saudi Arabia, that it may be flipping into Iran's orbit. I don't know, but it seems to make sense to me that something like that could happen. It also makes sense to be possibly that Saudi Arabia will take some kind of a significant military action, because if you are Saudi Arabian prince, then you do not want the spread of that kind of thing across the bridge, do you? So I don't know. I think that we are already looking at the kind of instability in the Middle East, political instability, that would make the Zionists salivate and say, okay, we got them starting to fall. Now that Bahrain is fallen, what you want to motivate the Saudis, you want to say to the Saudis, look, Bahrain is fallen. Yeah, man, you can't let that happen. I mean, you're next. You need to send your soldiers over there and take it back, right? Boom. Now you've got them fighting amongst each other. And then you want to false flag some maybe some missile or drone strikes from Saudi Arabia from Iran into Saudi Arabia, hit the Saudis, and you keep telling them the Iranians are hitting you. In addition, you want to you want to have them fighting. You want to have a reduction of food, and of course, you want to keep the Straits of Hormuz closed. Now, one may look at this and say, but the Israelis are getting pummeled and they're losing a lot of people and they're getting weaker. Yeah, but understand this. The Israeli leadership doesn't care about the Israeli people. These people are sociopaths and religious lunatics. They don't care about anything. From their perspective, so what? Their perspective is we, meaning the leadership of Israel, want to take over the entire Middle East. And if, let's say, 80% of the Israelis die doing it, well, we got the other 20%. And with the other 20%, God will have us reproduce and be fruitful, and then we'll fill the whole Middle East with Israelis. And boom, there you got it. Pax Judaica. And I think, I may be wrong, but I'll put it to you like this. I don't even think that's the plan. I do not think that's the plan. But to me, you can't look at the conversation between Epstein and Bill Gates, in which they talked about depopulation, getting rid of the poor people. You can't see that and then not look at what's going on here and say there's got to be some application here. And particularly when you look at this war and you say this war has the potential for depopulation, particularly of poor people. If there's less food, the poorer you are, the quicker you go first. The other thing I think is this: somewhere in, this Pax Judaica thing, you want to do two things. You want to destroy Iran, because ultimately you want to destroy Iran and control it, control their oil, control everything. Because if you're a fascist Israel, you want to control everything. So you want to weaken Iran, you want to destroy Iran as a state, as a civilization, and replace it with the new Israel, right? But interestingly enough, I think you got to destroy the US too. Because the US is, I'll put it like this. It reminds me of Ukraine in a way, because the US was like, yes, we'll get these Nazis all straight, and then we will, when we get these Nazis straight, we'll overthrow Russia, and who cares about the Nazis? They're cannon fodder. Meanwhile, the Nazis in Ukraine are thinking to themselves, we'll get the Americans to help us, we'll overthrow Russia, and then we'll rule the white race. In other words, then the Nazis in Ukraine will become the leaders of the world. So there's no honor amongst thieves. Both sides are, let's work together to take out, be it Russia or whatever. But both of them are also thinking, after we take out Russia, I'll take out you, or I'll take out you. They're both thinking that, right? There's no honor amongst thieves. That when we get done doing this job, it's almost like me and you rob a bank. As soon as we get finished, I shoot you in the head because I don't want to share half the money. I always planned on being in charge of everything, but I needed your help, right? That's the Nazis in Ukraine along with the US. They felt like, we'll take Russia and then we will rule the world, and so much for the US. It'll have to fall in line into our great rule. I think in a twisted kind of way, the Zionists are the same way. And that their plan is simply to use the US up, to use the US. And here's the thing. This, they already know, this is something that's going to tear the US limb from limb internally. It will create an incredible amount of instability in the US, political instability. And what do they want? They want the people in the US to have some kind of a, what's the term I'm looking for? Like a civil kind of war, but enough that destabilizes the United States, probably impoverishes the United States, because they know this. Here's what the Zionists know. Look, this war happens, and this war tears the United States limb from limb. This war breaks the United States till it's like only got a few pennies left. Here's what the Zionists know. All they got to do is Congress, and Congress will give them those last few pennies. If the United States has one last slice of bread, and the people of the US are like, hey, can we have a slice of the bread? The Republicans and the Democrats will come together and vote to give it to Israel. They will let you starve. They will let you suffer. They will destroy your way of life and everything else. And they'll give it all to Zionism, thinking that Zionism is a part of them. No, Zionism sees you the same way. You're nothing but cattle and cannon fodder. Even the puppets in government who think they're a special political class, they're nothing but cannon fodder either. So I believe that the plan, let me break it out for you. Number one, you have to drag all of the Muslim countries in the region together into a war so they can fight and beat each other to a pulp. In that war, you must destroy all the desalinization plants, and so that all of the Muslims in the area either die of thirst or leave. You got to get them out of the way, right? Number three, you need to destroy all of the, what's it called? Oil infrastructure and gas infrastructure, so that they can't make any money to rebuild, so that it's just a impoverished wasteland. And additionally, that cuts down on the oil for industry around the world, and it cuts down on the gas for industry in the world and gas that is used for fertilizer. You then control this region of the world. That's Pax Judaica, right? That's your area. You take the whole Middle East is now yours because you've either killed, starved, or ran out all of the Muslims, the Arabs and the Persians alike. And now that you've cut back on fertilizer, you've cut back on, I mean, let's face it, you don't have diesel fuel for your tractors to run gigantic farms. And if you do, the food's so expensive that people can't afford it and they're starving, right? So what do you do now? And the people that are left are hungry. So they're, what do you call it? Their fertility is dramatically decreased. And of course, there's other things that may or may have not happened in the last few years that may also decrease people's fertility. That seems quite possible that that's happening. So you're going to get your depopulation and your lesser amount of people on the earth. As Bill Gates and Epstein talked about, you're going to get less useless eaters, right? As they call them, Malthusianists feel that there's too many people, and they talk about it. And I think this is part of, so what we're seeing right now is part of the Greater Israel Project, and look for them to continue as best they can to do two things right now. This is what the two things you got to look for. Number one, three. Number one, to drag the Muslim countries into battle against each other so they can do Zionist dirty work for it by killing as many of each other as they can and by destroying as much of the infrastructure in the region as they can, right? Number two, as part of one, including desalinization plants. The desalinization plants has to go so the Muslims don't have water, and of course, the oil infrastructure. Now, that's number one. Number two, you got to look out for, and that is taking out the United States. I think that you're pitting the U.S. Look, they're not stupid. They see that the U.S. is at a very vulnerable, economically and politically vulnerable time. Things aren't working. The people want something that they can't get from their leadership. The people are not represented by their leadership, and they figured it out. And so now the people are saying, we want something different. We don't like what we're getting. We want something else. So you got a level of political instability. Perfect time to drag them into this war that they don't want. Perfect time to drive up the gas prices that they don't want driven up. And what do? You create political instability the same way you do in North and South Korea, the same way you do between the Slavic Russians and the Slavic Ukrainians. Everywhere you can, you create instability so Americans beat the hell out of each other, fight the hell out of each other. Their country falls into poverty, and you've done away with the U.S. See, the U.S., the leaders here think they're working. You know what's funny? What goes around comes around. These Gulf leaders think to themselves, we're working with the U.S., and the U.S. is going to help us and look out for us and protect us. They're our allies. They're going to look out for us. They're our buddies. And as soon as the war starts, they throw you to the dogs. Right? And they're like, oh, I can't believe they threw us to the dogs. Oh boy, are you naive. However, I think the U.S. is going to deal with the same thing in that what the Zionists are doing right now is they're just asset stripping the U.S. That's what the Zionists are doing. They're asset stripping it. They're doing the same thing. And they're doing the same thing to Europe. Why do you think they're shutting everything down in Europe? See, it really works. So what are the Zionists doing with Europe? Now Europe is done. They were already, see, they dragged the Europeans into this Ukraine conflict to wipe out Europe. Let me ask you this. The leadership of Ukraine, Zelensky, remember the guy Mendich? Where did he fly to? Israel. Look across the leadership of Ukraine, and there are a bunch of Zionists. Do you think that's an accident? Do you think there's a country with a bunch of goose-stepping Nazis flying all over the place, and it's just an accident that they happen to think about this? A country full of goose-stepping Nazis, the whole country's run by a bunch of Zionists. And then they even say this, why, for God's sake, they can't be Nazis because they're being led by Zionists. They're being led by Zelensky. He's Jewish. Mendich, he's Jewish. Spiegel, all of them. Look at the names. The Ukraine is run by, the whole government is packed with Zionists, and they are robbing Ukraine blind. And the United States is sending hundreds of billions in, and they're funneling it right out the door. It's going in, and they're stealing it. And Mendich, what does he do when he gets caught? Straight to Israel. So what they're doing is this: they're asset stripping the United States. Here's what I mean. What do they call them? Vulture capitalists do. They buy a company and they asset strip the company. They lay the people off. They sell everything down to the chairs and the conference tables. They find out how much credit that company has. If the company can borrow $100 billion, they borrow $100 billion. They take everything that company has, and then they shut the company down and move on to the next company. That's what I call them, vulture capitalists. They go into a company, they grab a company, do a hostile takeover or buy it, and then they asset strip it. They take everything, then they move on to the next, right? What's happening with the United States? It's asset stripping. That's what it is. Mendich and Schmiegel and Zelensky and all of these people. What? Think about it. A war is going on, and what is Zelensky's job? Think about what is Zelensky's job? To ask for money. Nothing else. He doesn't care about weapons. What is Zelensky's job? We need more money. You must give us another $90 billion. Americans, everything we get, we could win if we would just get more money. Money, money, money. You have money, give us money. You, and you. Germany, money. He comes to the NATO meeting. Hey, what are you doing here? Money. Give me money, money, money. Why? He's asset stripping Europe. The Zionists are asset stripping Europe. His job is to funnel every dime out of there. And then what do you see? You see all of these things where, yes, there's some kind of a weird thing going on where these they're supposed to X amount of dollars were supposed to go out for tanks, and for some reason it didn't go out for tanks. Yeah, it went out to Tel Aviv. As they asset strip Europe, and now they make sure that no think about this. They make sure that no oil and gas is going to Europe. Europe needs oil and gas. So what are they going to do? They're going to make sure that Europe doesn't get any oil and gas. What's going to happen in Europe when they don't have oil and gas? Depopulation. The people are going to die. They're going to move. They're going to starve. They're not going to have children. All of those things are coming to Europe because they ain't going to have gas, and they ain't going to have oil, and they're not going to have fertilizer, and they ain't getting nothing. And what they've done is they've gotten these poor saps in Europe to hate Russia and to push Russia off so bad that Russia then says, we ain't selling you no gas. Great. You have isolated Europe. You have economically isolated Europe. Europe's done. Europe's not a threat to you, right? You've got rid of the gas and oil. You have asset stripped Europe, right? You've deindustrialized Europe. You've taken all of their money. We need another 90 billion. We don't have it. Borrow it. Why? Why do you want them to borrow it? Because you want them to be in debt afterwards. Who are they borrowing it from? Probably a bunch of Zionists. A Rothschild bank. Think about it. There's one of the reasons, and Alistair Crook talked about it. One of the reasons that the Europeans are afraid for the Ukraine conflict to go over is because they owe like $300 billion in loans. But who do they owe them to? The Rothschild Bank, the same people who own and run Israel, the Zionists. So now you owe like $300 billion to the Zionists. And you know what the Zionists are squeezing you? Go take another loan for 90. Borrow every dime you can from the Rothschild Bank. Borrow every dime you can, and from us. And then when you can't borrow anymore, we're going to come back to you and squeeze you for the loans. And you know what they're going to say? They're going to do the same thing to Europe that they do in Africa, that they do in the Middle East. They're going to go to France, and they're going to go Germany, and they're going to say, hey, here's the deal. Here's what we'd like you to do. We'd like you to pay us off right now. You see, people are like, oh, they'll never end the war. They will. Once they've gotten the last penny, once they've gotten the last loan out of Europe, they'll allow the war to end. And then they'll start going to France and Germany and England and say, oh, well, we need you to pay up. And France and Germany and England say, but we can't pay up. Oh, man. I guess we'll have to take your ports. I guess we'll have to take your railways. I guess we'll have to start taking over your assets. And the Rothschild Bank comes in and takes everything they have. They're going to do you like they do the African countries. They put you in debt, And the money has been, here's the thing about it. You, Europe, have borrowed $300 billion. The $300 billion has gone to Kiev. Mendich and Zelensky and the rest of these Zionist criminals have laundered that $300 billion back to Tel Aviv. Now they're going to come to you when you're out of money. And now the people in Tel Aviv are going to say, or in this instance, the city of London, are going to say, okay, that $300 billion that we already have, because we loaned it to you, we laundered it through Tel Aviv right back into our stinking pockets. Now we're going to tell you we want it. And we know you can't pay us. And that's when we're going to start stripping your ass, and we're going to start grabbing your ports and everything you have. We're going to grab, and we'll own everything in Europe. And then we'll say, oh, you want to buy some oil? Yeah, we'll sell you some, because now we've killed all and dislocated all the Arabs. We now have the Middle East. And then we'll come back to you and say, if you want to buy oil or gas, you can buy it from us. Meanwhile, you're like, well, I'll buy it from the United States. Guess what? Their assets stripped in the United States also. And guess what? They're trying to throw the U.S. into poverty. They are throwing the U.S. and the Iranians against each other to destroy both. And they want to drag everybody in so everybody destroys each other. And in the end, they've done their depopulation. They got their money and they go on about their business. That's my opinion. Now, no, I'm going to go, let me go a different way. I'm not going to say that this is my opinion. I'm going to say that as an intellectual exercise, I wanted to run through that possibility. But there are things in there that are undeniable and self-evident. It's undeniable that the Europeans borrowed several hundred billions of dollars from the Rothschild Bank to put in Ukraine. It's undeniable at this point that that money was laundered through Ukraine, which was run by Zionists, and back somewhere, my guess is right back into the Rothschild Bank, but whatever, back into the hands of Zionists. So you lent them money, they gave it to somebody, your guys, and your guys laundered it right back to you. And so you get it twice. You get to lend it to them. It's like picking somebody's pocket and selling them back their own wallet. That's what they're doing to Europe. And voila, they get to deindustrialize Europe. Now, Europe needs to be rebuilt, doesn't it? Who do you think is going to rebuild Europe? They will. They'll say, oh man, Europe's looking pretty bad. Just like at the end of the Marshall Plan. It'll be the Zionist Marshall Plan. Okay, we'll go back to Europe and we'll rebuild Europe. But guess what we're going to have when we rebuild Europe? We're going to own everything. By the way, we're going to have the whole Middle East, so we control the gas and oil for the entire world. Now, what's interesting is the Russians and the Chinese. What country is the best in the world right now at building nuclear power plants? The Russians. And Russia and China are working on massive projects for nuclear power. I think the Russians and the Chinese understand something, and they understand that there is an evil and diabolical move afoot to take over the energy, the oil and gas energy in the Middle East, so that that can be controlled and that can be used as a mechanism of control to rule the world. But if you found other methods of energy, with China, they got these gigantic desert fields for solar energy. They are doing all kinds of things for nuclear energy, and Russia's big on nuclear energy. So I think they realize that the future for them is not going to be gas and oil. I think now, think about Russia. Here's what's interesting about Russia. I just was in Russia not too long ago, and should be back hopefully in a couple of weeks. Here's the thing about Russia that's important. Everybody's like, oh, Russia makes all this gas. They make everything. Well, I heard it's like 15% or less is now gas and oil. They make money, but that ain't the only thing. But what is Russia doing? When I was there, I saw they're doing something called gasification. What does that mean? That means the Russians are saying we're going to use gas internally. It is so cheap for us to create that we can heat our houses, that we can run all of our own stuff with gas. I think the Russians' plan in the long run is to say, look, we're selling gas now, but the time is going to come when that could be a problem, because these crazy people are trying to control the world's gas and oil choke points. So we may not be able to sell it, but through gasification, guess what? we can use gas to run our entire economy, and we can do it really, really cheap because it's ours. We can do it at cost. So I think the Russians' plan is we will gasify our own country and run everything by gas as we transition to nuclear. And I think the same with the Russians, with the Chinese. The Chinese plan is to be able to work with the Russians to get as much as they can as far as gas and energy from Russia, because they have uh, a border with Russia. But I also think the Russians and the Chinese are both planning on nuclear, because I think they understand that in the future, that the diabolical and evil people are working to control the world. And they're like, by now they've come to the conclusion, we can't go face to face and fight China. We can't go face to face and fight Russia. So we got to go to the Middle East. We got to take the Middle East, and then we can control the oil choke points, so we can shut them down. Meanwhile, their erstwhile allies, the Israelis, feel that they own the world. So they're going to do everything they need to do. In the United States, they're going to destroy you meanwhile. So they're the only ones left standing. I think that's the plan for Zionism, is to get everybody out of the Middle East, to take the Middle East, to destroy the United States, and be the only ones left standing. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not even saying I'm right. I'm not even saying that is anything other than a blind theory, blind speculation, but it's worth speculating. We have nothing else to do right now but speculate as we watch our leaders team up with Zionism to wipe out the world's economy. And look, they told you what they were going to do. You'll have nothing and like it. The Great Reset. They told you what they were going to do. You know, that's what I think. They told you what they were going to do. So how could they not? It all makes sense. Anyway, that's just something to throw out there. Share this on all your social media platforms if you like this stuff. By the way, there's my P.O. box. I got a whole bunch of stuff in my P.O. box. It's great. I'm just starting to open it up. People have sent me all kind of cool things. And some people have made donations. I appreciate that. Patreon, thanks for my Patreon people. PayPal people, there are people that donate through PayPal and buy me a coffee, which is always great. So thanks a lot. There's a lot of ways to donate, and I appreciate everybody who helps keep the channel on the air, and of course, who donates, because I'm going to Russia with Scott, hopefully in another two weeks, basically. And of course, you know, Scott and I, we have to pay for that through donations, and that allows a lot of good things to happen. So thanks, everybody. Share those on all your social media platforms. It's just my theory, but kind of makes sense a little bit, doesn't it? I'm out.